The Village came out in 2004 and was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. This is a film which I unashamedly love. It's a film that forms part of M. Night Shyamalan's uh, quartet of films that he first released, starting with The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable Signs, and then concluding in 2004 with The Village. Uh, those four films to me are all very meaningful, extraordinarily well made films that really resonate with me and that I really, really enjoy. Um, but the village is almost in a way the most curious one. It's not the best. It's the black sheep almost of those four films, but more of a sort of very light grey sheep, if you know what I mean. Because I really do adore this film. It has so many things in it that I think are just incredible. It's firing on almost every cylinder in terms of things that I am really drawn to in films. Um, Unfortunately, there are some things that bring the film down slightly for me, and it's a real shame because I do love the film, but I think the things that bother most people about the film also bother me, just not probably not to the same extent. But I'll go into that. Um, so in terms of qualities that I like about the film, it's really magnificent actually. The cinematography is wonderful. It's got great suspense in a way that a lot of films in the last 20 years or so do not. The music's great. I really love the characters. It's got really evocative themes. It's really quite. It's a very rich film. It's a very layered film. Whenever I watch it, I just think it just overflows with themes and with good qualities and with thoughtfulness. And it's just a film that I really like. I'll get into all of this in the next minute or so. And of course, finally, it's a thriller on the surface, and then it's also kind of dramatic as well. And the core of the film, for me anyway, when I watch it, is the romance of the film between Joaquin Phoenix's character and Bryce Dallas Howard's. Um, Obviously, I mean, this film came out 16 years ago. I will be discussing spoilers to the film, and I think that's kind of necessary to do because it's really in the spoilers, it's in the twists of the film that for a lot of people, the film kind of fell flat. Um, and I think those problems are really in terms of the two twists of the film. Um, the execution of them, the order of events in terms of how it's revealed, and just the logic of it. I think that's what irritates most people, and I'll go into how I feel about that after I've discussed the positives of the film. So I mentioned the cinematography. The cinematography to this film is breathtaking. I think it's one of the best looking films of the 21st century so far. I really love all of the way that a lot of the scenes are lit. There's a lot of really fantastic looking nighttime scenes. Um, a lot of really interesting camera angles and shots throughout the film. I remember watching this I saw this when this came out at the cinema in 2004. I would have been about, I think, 9 at the time, and I remember even at the time, I was thinking in my head, why is that scene being shot like that? Why are you not seeing this at the moment? And it was a film that, for me, it started me thinking initially, as a young person, why are films thinking a bit deeper into the craft of films, why are films shot in a certain way? Why is the camera there? Why are we seeing this? Why are we hearing this? It's a really incredible film technically, really creative as well. I really like. There's a really nice use of color throughout the film, and I think the best example of that is really there's a divide in the film. So again, full spoilers. Midway through the film, it pulls a cycle essentially. So you think that Joaquin Phoenix is the main character, but then he gets stabbed, and it turns out to be Bryce Dallas Howard who sort of takes charge for the second half of the film. For the first half, all of the colours are quite bright. It's clear that they were shooting in sunny conditions. I think it looks like summer or even sort of early autumn, probably early autumn actually, because it's got a rich colour to it. It's not quite as vibrant as midsummer. Whereas the second half of the film is very definitely winter. There's a lot of shadows. Everything's quite muted. Um, and that really reflects the theme of the film well, the tone of the film well. It's something that I really like. Um, the suspense of the film as well is incredible. It follows on from Signs, the director's previous film, which is one of my favorite films of all time. In the sense that you've got these creatures that are quite mysterious, but you never really see them. It's shot and it's edited in such a way where if you see it for the first time, you're leaning forward, you're trying to get a closer look, but the film never quite gives you that. And I think it's almost a shame because the suspense in the first half of the film for me is so good, it's so on point. It's almost a shame that the twist of the film happens and it turns out that these creatures that live in the woods are not in fact real. But the suspense is so good, and I'll get into, as I said, I'll get into the twist once I've cleared through the positives of the film for me. Um, the other positive, I guess, has got to be the performances. So Joaquin Phoenix is a tremendous actor. He can do a wide range of characters, and this is one of his more sort of quiet, more stoic roles, but still quite emotional, still really sympathetic. Um, and of course, Bryce Dallas Howard, the daughter of Ron Howard, the director. This was her first film role, and it's really incredible. She plays her character in the film Ivy, who's blind, and it's really really well done. She gives a great performance, and the romance between those two is just so believable. Like, I mean, 99.9% of romances in films just make me roll my eyes. But this one, I've always thought there's just something really strong to it, something really touching and tender, and there's the way it unfolds in this film. Other films I can imagine would try the same thing, and it would just come across corny or laughable or pathetic. But with this, it's really really meaningful. It really is, and I guess in large part that's owed to the two actors. And then, of course, the supporting cast. You've got the village elders played by William Hurt, Sigourney Weaver, Brendan Gleeson. They're all acting their hearts out. I mean, it's a really really good film in terms of the characters and the performances. Adrian Brody is the sort of mentally handicapped member of the village that ends up being quite instrumental in the plot. It's a sort of performance that you probably wouldn't get today. Um, it's just a bit slightly cringeable, but it's fine for the context of the film. Um, and that brings me on to the final sort of positive that I want to discuss of the film, which is the themes. It's a deeply deeply evocative film. As I mentioned earlier, it's a film that just overflows with thoughtfulness. It really really does. Um, I guess I should mention the two twists of the film, just to remind, if you've not seen the film for years, just to remind you. So the creatures that are set up in the first half of the film are not real. It's a sort of conspiracy by the elders of this remote village, to stop their children and their descendants from ever going into the woods. And the reason for that is because even the film is supposedly set in the 1890s, but by the end of the film, it's revealed that it's actually the present day in America, and the elders are a group of people who had all undergone sort of horrible personal tragedies, and they decided to do this sort of social experiment almost of setting up this little commune in the middle of a forest and living like it's the 19th century. And they didn't want their children ever to leave. So those are the two twists. Right away, you've got the main theme of the film towards the end, aside from the sort of love conquers all stuff that's going on, which is really really nice. It's not cornball at all. There's this theme of it's impossible to escape loss, if you will. It's impossible to escape tragedy and heartache and all of these things. The village elders thought by creating this little community for themselves that they would remove themselves from all the ills of the world, but alas, it didn't. They've discovered all new ills. They've discovered bad things in themselves, and it's a really nuanced film that way. It really makes you sympathise for these, for them, and what they've endured in their life, but it also shows the pathos really, and just the hopelessness and the fact that they've created this village. They still believe in it by the end of the film, but they don't. Their confidence in it is a bit shattered. They realise that they can't always escape the bad things, and I think that's quite powerful. It's quite meaningful, and then you've got a general theme of hope throughout the film as well. People are constantly talking about hope, and there's conversations that seem quite lofty where they're talking about the higher ideals in life and hope and love and all of this sort of stuff, and it's handled well. It's handled well, and I also watching the film again. I got a this is something I've never thought of before actually, but I got a real sort of Truman Show vibe from some aspects of the film. The Truman Show, I reviewed it a couple of weeks ago or so. It's a film about many things, but one of the themes is sort of escaping the confines of your own life and existence. So in the Truman Show, Truman escapes the world of the reality television show that he's trapped in. But in the village, the theme is more centered around your younger main characters, Joaquin Phoenix, Bryce Dallas Howard, wanting more than what they've got within their own confines just now. So they're confined in this village surrounded by forest, and they're kept there by fear, essentially, by these lies that they've been told by the village elders, and then by the end of the film they discover the truth. But I suppose in contrast to the Truman Show, the village ends with them choosing to stay in the village, which is an interesting twist on it. Um, One of many themes in the film, something that I noticed watching it this time round, and it's just such a thoughtful film. It really is, and it almost makes me sad to come on to the less good aspects of the film, which is really the plot, the script, and the twists. Not so much the script, actually. That's unfair. The script's wonderful. Dialogue and everything perfect, but the way that the twists at the end of the film play out is bad. It really it breaks my heart almost to talk about this because I do love the film, but the way that but I understand that the twists of the film and the direction the plot takes is not good. It just isn't. Um, I mean, for one thing, the plot twist that the creatures are not real comes way too early. That happens around about the halfway point in the film, and it deflates all of the incredible tension that has been built up in the film thus far. Um, it really does, and that's a shame because, as I mentioned earlier, the suspense was great. So when Ivy is being pursued by the creature in the woods, which we then find out is Adrian Brody, um, there's no tension there, and it's a shame because it's a very tense scene. It's shot very well. If we didn't know in the film at that point that the creatures were fake, it would have been a very genuinely scary scene. But unfortunately, it's got the air taken out of it a little bit by the fact that we know that it's fake, and it's also quite confusing as well, just in the order that happens. Um, and I guess also there's some liberties taken really with the twist at the end, which is really surprising because one of the best examples of how to do a twist well in a film comes from The Sixth Sense, which is M. Night Shyamalan's first feature film, which he made only 5 years before The Village. So if you rewatch The Sixth Sense, the twist completely makes sense in the context of the film. If you rewatch it, so one of the most famous twists of all time. If you don't know it, then well, I mean, I would suggest watching more films. But Bruce Willis is a ghost at the end of The Sixth Sense. But if you rewatch the film, it doesn't cheat in any way. There's a lot of really clever editing, and clever scenes where your brain kind of just accepts that, for instance, Bruce Willis has just been talking to the boy's mother, but you rewatch the film and actually no, she never acknowledges them. Um, or he goes to a restaurant to meet his wife. He sits down in a chair, but he doesn't. The chair doesn't move. He just sits there. So the twist in that film works, but in The Village, it doesn't. it really doesn't. They take a few liberties. For instance, you know, the creatures when you see them are all like kind of grunting and growling and behaving like animals, and it just, I mean, is that supposed to be are the elders in the suits making these noises with their mouths? I mean, it's really odd when you watch it again, imagining that that's what's happening. There's a scene where Lucius, Joaquin Phoenix's character, goes into the woods early on in the film, and you know, he does it spur of the moment. He just summons the courage, and when he's there, he sees one of the creatures. You see the sort of at the end of its robes as it walks into the distance, and you see the trees moving, and it's like, okay, so does one of the elders just sort of patrol the woods 24/7 in case you're wearing one of the suits in case someone ventures into the woods, which seems a bit strange. And then coincidentally, they just happened to be where Joaquin Phoenix was walking into. So that was odd, and then also just the fact that it's set in the 1890s to begin with, I thought was odd because at the end of the film, you realise that the elders all moved to this place in like the 1970s. You know, they've been there for what 30 years maximum, but well, I mean, for a starter, the population's exploded. There's so many, there's so many people there that it looks far more than what just this core of like 8 or 9 people would uh, produce with each other, which is a very strange way to think about it, but it seems like a lot of people. Um, yeah, there's the fact that it's in the 1890s. I just don't understand because it's a period accurate 1890s in terms of their technology, in terms of their clothing, in terms of the way that they speak. It's all very very verbose and very lofty. Um, it doesn't make any sense. Why would they not all be speaking and looking like they're from the 1970s? I think really what the way that the twist should have unfolded, it should have been that these elders, a group of people from this community in the 1800s, and maybe the secret was passed down, or maybe throughout the film these characters learned that it's all just fake and that the monsters aren't real. I don't know. I think that might have been a better way to do it. But then I guess you lose the theme of loss and of not being able to escape the horrors of life and all that sort of stuff with the direct living link to the elders. I guess you would lose that, but I don't really get that part of the film. And also, yeah, there's just some yeah, the elders have their discussions about the fact that it's all fake, just in like the open, outdoors, where in places where it seems quite easy for people just to eavesdrop, which I thought was strange. And it's a shame because those are some of the best scenes in the film. There's one in particular where William Hurt tells all the rest of them that he sent Ivy, his daughter, to the towns, to get these medicines after Lucius has been stabbed, and it's a really really powerful scene. But he's really acting his heart out. But yeah, there's just the backdrop of you better speak quietly. You don't want one of the kids hearing this or something. But that's the issues with the plot. It's a tremendously good film overall, and it's just a shame that rewatching it's hard to. I think I do. I think when I'm watching, I don't really think about how inaccurate the plot twists are. I just kind of focus on the good things in the film, which are really, really good. I mean, this is. I hesitate to call it, one of my favourite films of the last 20 years, just because it does have its issues. But in terms of films that I watch often, in terms of films that have been meaningful to me, I think this is really just a fantastic film. I really, really do. For a rating, this was difficult for me because in my head, when I think about this film, it's a film in like the 80s, which is as good as I mean, I'm quite stingy with my ratings. That's like, being in the 80s is good, but I have to accept that the plot twist elements aren't that great. So I'm going to give it a still very generous rating of 78 out of 100. If it didn't have the plot twist issues, if some scenes were maybe rearranged, this could have been shooting for the high 80s. But as it stands, 78 out of 100. A deeply meaningful film, very, very well made, and one that I'm looking forward to watching again.